In the last video, we covered the beginning of the garden in February and March. This video is a continuation of everything I've done in the garden from April all the way through to July. We begin April with something that was drastically needed, the rebuilding of my compost pile. What happened back in February when I first built this is I didn't cover the front, the top, nor the sides. And so all of my food waste that was in the heap got absolutely decimated by the local fox. So what I did is I walked the streets and I found more pallets. Using these metal brackets that I had left over from moving, I joined the pallets together, creating 4 walls and a roof. I had to cut some down to size. For extra precaution against the local foxes, I bought a roll of chicken wire and I installed that. The chicken wire won't keep out rats, it won't keep out worms, but it will keep out local cats and the foxes from eating my leftover eggs. This whole process was honestly really fun, and I've never done anything quite like this. So to build a complete structure, although flimsy, a structure with hinges, a working lid to keep all of my material, all of my garden waste together, and a place for my food to go once I was done with it, was just fantastic. To cut down on the pollution of my food waste being driven into landfill, I don't have a green bin. I just use this, and it's fantastic. A little bit of watering to help kickstart the decomposition process, and we were done. In the end of the last video, something I did is I planted loads of seeds. Everything you can imagine, lots of herbs, lots of vegetables, and they were beginning to come up. Checking every single day, seeing the lettuce, the kale, the rosemary, the thyme, the little tomatoes, beautiful. There's something so wonderful about waking up every morning, rushing outside to the back garden, and just seeing what has come alive. One day in mid-April, I went away for a very long weekend, and this is what I came back to. Slightly overwhelmed by the fact that all of my seeds had been blown over in the wind, I just decided to ignore the mess, pretend it didn't happen, and mow the lawn. As part of that long weekend, I went to see my mum, and she had a bounty of tomato plants for me. What had happened is last year in her flower bed, she had loads of tomatoes growing. The tomatoes had fallen into the dirt, and she wanted to clean them up, but rather than taking them out, I suggested, hey, why not leave them in the bed, and then they'll mulch down and fertilize the plants to grow next year. What I didn't quite believe that would happen is those seeds from the tomatoes would grow into an abundance of tomato plants. So next on my list, with another one of my found pallets, was to create a raised bed entirely to grow beans. So cutting up wood that I just found on the street, I constructed this raised bean bed. And when I tell you, it was the most fun I have had in a long, long time. Getting to use the drill, screws, the saw, brilliant fun. I began by laying down a nice thick layer of cardboard. The cardboard will slowly decompose, bringing carbon into the compost. Once that was about half full, I then threw some compost on top. Once that compost was well and mixed in, I then threw on some dirt that I'd found from the garden, just general earth. Organic material, not terribly nutrient rich, but enough. So mixing all of that together, I had the perfect blend for beans. Beans, similarly to potatoes, are nitrogen fixers. What this means is that they have a bacteria that lives on the roots that converts nitrogen in the air into nitrogen that the plants can actually consume. So by planting these beans in this bed, I'm adding nitrogen to the soil, therefore further fertilizing it for future plants. After a quick watering, I fixed more chicken wire to the back of it just to add a bit more support. In my last video, back in March, I planted these seed potatoes in the ground, and I'm happy to say they have come up beautifully. Now, the way potatoes grow is they send out roots, and these roots then grow into potatoes themselves. If the potatoes are exposed to sunlight, they then turn toxic and green. So to avoid that happening, we do something called hilling, which is this: adding compost to just block out the sun from those roots. As a backup, I'd also planted some potatoes in a plastic bag, just to keep round the corner in case the main crop failed. For a bit of decoration, once the main crop of potatoes had been hilled up, I put in this lovely little boundary. I think it's cute. Nothing else to it. I think it's pretty. With spring fully here, the brambles had flowered, and the bees went absolutely crazy, extracting pollen from every flower that's soon to be a blackberry. And when I tell you there were hundreds, and it was a joy to watch. To be able to provide food for our local native bees is just something that I am so grateful for the opportunity to do. In times where food scarcity is a real problem and pollinators are dying off at unprecedented rates, it's so necessary. Near the back of the garden, where the sun often hits the most, was this bare patch of ground with nothing growing on it. There was some grass, brambles, nettles. I cleared all of that and decided it would be the perfect place to put those tomato plants. Using a pick is fun and quite brilliant a lot of the time, but I decided that I needed something else, so I walked to B&Q and I actually bought, for the first time in my life, a garden fork. And when I tell you garden forks, there's a reason they're so popular. It made light work of the earth. Although the tomatoes weren't quite ready yet, they were growing slowly but surely in the shelter of the shed, ready to be planted within a few weeks. With the local cat stopping by to say hello, I decided now was the perfect time to just do a bit of pruning of the garden, add a bit more to the compost, get in it for fun, stomp it down. The compost was thriving at this point, not yet producing actual, material to plant with, but compressing and breaking down so beautifully and retaining moisture better than I thought we possibly could. The forest of Dean acorns that I'd planted in March were up now and absolutely thriving. Beautiful little oak saplings that will one day be towering trees. June was the month of growth. The summer solstice looming, everything just went straight into action. But with the air pressure rising rapidly, I didn't feel confident about the amount of rainfall that would get over the summer. And as it turns out, if you're watching this now in August, I was pretty spot on. So what I decided to do, which is what you're now seeing, is dig a lovely big hole around this old root of an old cherry tree. And I built a pond. I began by digging this big hole, and then I put in a pond liner, or rather a pond liner. After the pond liner was in, I cut it to shape, then I put in the real pond liner. This is necessary because otherwise the water will just drain straight into the ground and it won't hold that ecosystem and that microclimate that a wildlife pond does. All I had to do now was wait for the last bit of rain before the drought. Part of the reason for making this pond is to allow a whole ecosystem of animals and plants to live here. By adding these stones on the perimeter, it gave an area for frogs and newts and birds to just sit and bask in the sun by this lovely pool of fresh water. With the bramble flowers already turning to berries, it was time to get a bit more work done on the maintenance of the beans. After doing a bit of weeding, I now had space to plant in the rest of my beans that I've been growing in pots. After watering those in, I then planted some mint, gave that a water, some Californian poppies, that I'd been growing in the greenhouse, one of the few crops that didn't go flying across the garden. I staked it to support it, just so it would stay up and grow nice and linear. Back in March, I planted this kale, which at the time was only twice the size of a robin. Now, it was a behemoth. Beautiful, beautiful brassica. I then found this beautiful, lonesome, honest little oak hiding beneath the fern. I didn't plant this oak here. I just found it and decided to nurture it. It was now late June and the temperatures had soared. An aggressive heat wave meant I had to take lots of precautions, resorting to blankets over potatoes. Unconventional, but it worked. The pond, at this stage, was adoring of the heat. I put watercress in, which had shot up, a yellow flag iris sitting at the back, and water crowfoot living beneath the surface, oxygenating. With water incredibly scarce in the local area, the wildlife came and took full advantage of the pond, which was the reason that I'd made it in the first place, to provide a place for drinking, for bathing. We had such wonderful wildlife sightings here, and we got to witness this fascinating great/blue tit fight over a seemingly endless supply of water. At one point, the sparrow even joined the fight. And of course, there were robins. But what's important is they all had places to drink, to cool off, to bathe. The pond was used as a drinking source, even by a squirrel, which I think fantastic, despite the very awkward position this guy got himself in right here. Don't know why he was like that. I made a ramp. Something that surprises me when I look at this footage is just how big a magpie is compared to a squirrel. Last, but certainly not least, we had a vulpes, a red fox, come to visit for a little midnight drink. It was now the end of June, and it was time for some planting. I had about 20 tomatoes, something like that. I had a lettuce, and most excitingly of all, brand new to me, 3 courgette plants. I've never grown courgette before, and this is something I'm far too excited about for a 24-year-old. As the ground had already been dug up, it was dead easy to get these in. Just needed to dig a little bit of earth up, and the tomatoes went straight in the ground, no problem at all. I had been slightly worried about slugs eating the tomatoes, but after a bit of research, I found that if the stems are the thickness of a pencil or larger, then apparently it's fine. It might look as if I'm planting these courgettes very, very far away from the tomatoes, but I have seen pictures of how big these guys get, and now, in retrospect, I think I should have planted them even further away. Courgettes are part of the melon family. They are in the same family as cucumbers and pumpkins, and next to this lettuce that I put in here, I don't know if there's going to be enough space. The last bit of work for June, I put in this radish in the front bed by the back door. With summer well and truly here, the butterflies came out in numbers. I began spotting lots of these little white ones with black spots on their wings, which I'd learnt from previous years are cabbage butterflies. Cabbage butterflies lay their eggs on brassicas, which are kale, and honestly absolutely decimate them. I knew this was happening. I knew there'd be caterpillars in the plant, but honestly it was so beautiful I couldn't stop them. With the tomatoes well and truly settled in, I found this little beetroot that I had lying around in the greenhouse. I thought, what better place to put it? On the shelf below the beetroot was a basil. I thought, what a better place for the basil than right by the kitchen. Over the years, I've heard lots of different experiments and fun gardening ideas, but there's one that stuck with me for a long time, and it's called the pomato. Potatoes and tomatoes are both members of the nightshade family, so you can technically grow them together. So what I did is I planted these potatoes in a pot and waited for them to grow. When they were grown, I would graft tomatoes onto potatoes, growing tomatoes and potatoes in one plant. Back in March, I had found this little tomato that I had growing indoors, quite feeble looking. I put it out and it's already grown tomatoes. I didn't think it would, but in amongst the kale and the rosemary, I think aesthetics just led it to thrive. A lovely, wonderful environment, full of love and parsley. The beans had begun to grow beans, and I had one little lone pea plant in the back corner of the bed. Everything was thriving at this point. The oaks were lovely, despite a bit of mildew, and the mint was vibrant. After a bit of dramatic raspberry watering, I went to check on the plants that I'd recently sown for the next round. Lots of lettuces, lots of kale, lots of herbs, just to see us through the autumn. Checking back on the tomato bed, it's astonishing progress. Look at the size of that lettuce, the courgettes were thriving, tomatoes going sky high. Absolutely wonderful. One day I was doing a bit of weeding and I saw this. It freaked me out at first, but after watching closely, I saw I was actually witnessing something incredibly wonderful and Attenborough-esque. It was a war between red and black ants happening in my garden, the stage of drama. I sat here for about an hour. It was now time for a bit of pruning with the courgettes, taking off those lower leaves just to stop them rotting, to give the rest a bit more space to breathe, a bit more light. The two plants at the front were doing really well, the one at the back was doing well. As I had put the tomatoes so close together, I decided that what I was going to do is constantly keep pruning the lower leaves off. So rather than them bushing out sideways and me having fruit that got lost, they will grow up. What it also meant is I'll be able to see the bindweed clearer. Bindweed is this little thing here, a string-like, beautiful, beautiful plant with gorgeous flowers, but it does strangle and choke out our plants. I always feel guilty removing bindweed because of how beautiful I find it, but it has to be done. By the end of July, the pond was just magnificent. A heavily established ecosystem, absolutely wonderful. Just a magical, magical wonderland, which I couldn't even conceive from well above, breathing straight air. It's safe to say at this point, there's a lot going on. This wasp is just a symptom of that. The kale plant had absolutely blossomed with cabbage caterpillars, and the cabbage caterpillars had absolutely decimated the kale plant, eating almost all of it over the course of a few weeks. I let them do it. I didn't really care. Yes, kale is delicious. Yes, I wanted to eat it. But to help a population of beautiful, beautiful native pollinators, it's just on my bucket list. To mark the end of the month, the courgette flowered, and I was in love. And there we have April, May, June, and July. A whole season of spring into summer of my new garden, and I've just been having the best time. The next episode will be a harvest episode. We'll dig up those potatoes, we'll eat those tomatoes, we'll harvest those beans, and it will be a bounty. But for now, it's the harvest of the animals. It's about the ebbs and the flows of a beautiful, natural garden, and what a pleasure it is to have it. Thank you for watching.